My phone lit up with a message from my sister Natalie at 9:43 p.m. Don't even think about showing up tomorrow, Camila. You're embarrassing, and I don't want you ruining my 30th birthday party. What she didn't know was that I had personally paid for the entire celebration at Rosehaven Manor, the luxury estate she'd been bragging about booking for 3 months. And I was about to make one phone call that would leave her with no venue, no party, and a very expensive lesson about family loyalty. Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. I stared at the cruel message on my phone screen, sitting in my modest apartment in Willowbrook Heights, surrounded by textbooks and my laptop displaying financial spreadsheets that told a completely different story than what my family believed about my life. At 27, I was supposedly the family disappointment, the sister who had wasted her business degree by going back to school for a master's in nonprofit management, living in what they assumed was a cramped student apartment, driving a 10-year-old Toyota Camry that had seen better days. What they didn't know was that 2 years ago, I had inherited $2.8 million from our great-aunt Prudence, a woman our family had barely acknowledged, but who had quietly built a textile fortune in the 1960s. While my family dismissed her as the weird old lady with too many cats, Aunt Prudence had been watching us grandnieces carefully. She left her entire estate to me with one simple note: "You're the only one who visited me without wanting something in return." Instead of announcing my windfall, I'd made a strategic decision. I would use the money to secretly support my family's dreams and happiness while completing my graduate degree in nonprofit management. I wanted to understand how to use wealth responsibly before revealing it. The irony wasn't lost on me that while my family pitied me for my poor life choices, I'd been quietly funding their successes from the shadows. The narrative my family had constructed about my life was both detailed and completely wrong. Because I lived simply, shopped at thrift stores, and drove an old car, they'd decided I was struggling financially. When I'd told them I was pursuing a master's degree, they'd assumed I was racking up student debt I couldn't afford. When I couldn't join expensive family vacations or dinners, they concluded I was too broke to participate in family activities. My older sister Natalie was the acknowledged success story. At 30, she worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized cosmetics company and lived in a trendy downtown apartment with her boyfriend Derek, a personal trainer who taught spin classes at an upscale gym. My younger brother Austin was finishing his MBA and already had a job lined up at a consulting firm. Both of them had real careers and financial stability, as my mother loved to point out during every family gathering. Meanwhile, I was apparently the cautionary tale, the sister who had made poor choices and was now paying the price through a lifestyle of forced frugality and academic delusion. What they didn't realize was that their struggling sister had been the anonymous benefactor behind several of their recent successes. When Natalie had applied for her current job 18 months ago, she'd mentioned during a family dinner that she was worried about the competition and wished she could afford a professional interview coach. 2 weeks later, she'd mysteriously received a gift certificate for 5 sessions with the city's top career consultant, supposedly from a radio contest she couldn't remember entering. I'd paid for those sessions through a shell company I'd created for anonymous giving. When Austin had stressed about affording his MBA program, a scholarship for students from Cedarfield County had suddenly become available, covering exactly his remaining tuition costs. The scholarship fund was real. I'd created and funded it specifically for students like my brother. Austin had celebrated his luck at finding such a perfectly targeted financial aid opportunity. When my parents had worried about affording repairs to their roof last spring, they had received a notice that their insurance company had decided to cover the full cost due to a policy adjustment review. I'd quietly paid the contractor directly and arranged for the insurance story to protect their dignity. For 2 years, I had been the secret fairy godmother of my family's financial worries, always careful to make my help look like coincidence, luck, or institutional assistance rather than charity from their supposedly unsuccessful daughter. But Natalie's 30th birthday party had been my most ambitious secret gift yet. 3 months ago, she'd mentioned during Sunday dinner how disappointed she was that all the nice venues for her milestone birthday were either booked or too expensive. She'd started talking about having to settle for the community center or Derek's apartment, neither of which felt special enough for the celebration she'd been dreaming of. That's when I learned about Rosehaven Manor, an exclusive event space about an hour outside the city. The manor was a converted 19th century estate with manicured gardens, a ballroom with crystal chandeliers, and grounds that looked like something from a fairy tale. It was exactly the kind of venue where Natalie would feel like the princess she'd always wanted to be. It was also completely outside her budget at $8,000 for a Saturday evening rental.
So I'd created another anonymous intervention. Through my shell company, I'd contacted Rosehaven Manor and arranged to sponsor a birthday celebration for a deserving young professional in the marketing industry. The venue management had then reached out to several marketing firms in the area, offering a complimentary event space for an employee celebration. Natalie's company had been one of the recipients, and when they'd offered the opportunity to their staff, Natalie had applied immediately. She'd been over the moon when she'd been selected. For weeks, she'd been bragging to everyone about her incredible luck in winning such an exclusive venue. She'd posted photos on social media, created elaborate plans for decorations and catering, and invited everyone she knew to what she was calling the party of the century. I'd watched her excitement with genuine joy, knowing that I was giving my sister the celebration she deserved while maintaining the fiction that her struggling sister couldn't even afford to help with party planning. But tonight's message had changed everything. The sister who had been secretly funding her dream party had just been told she was too embarrassing to attend it. The family member who had been anonymously supporting everyone's success for 2 years had been deemed unworthy of celebrating with them. As I sat in my apartment, looking at the cruel message that had just destroyed any remaining illusion about how my family really saw me, I realized that my days of anonymous giving were about to come to an end. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting indeed. The family that had spent years underestimating me was about to learn exactly who had been making their dreams come true. And my sister, who had just kicked me out of her birthday party for being an embarrassment, was about to discover that her perfect venue belonged to the sister she deemed unworthy of attending her special day. Sometimes the best way to teach people about gratitude is to show them exactly what they're taking for granted. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed calls and 27 text messages from various family members who had apparently heard about my banishment from Natalie's birthday party. But before dealing with the chaos that was undoubtedly brewing, I wanted to understand exactly how my family had constructed their version of my life over the past 2 years. A version so far from reality, it was almost impressive in its completeness. The narrative they'd built had started during my senior year at Riverside University. While my classmates were interviewing for corporate positions and planning post-graduation celebrations, I'd been quietly dealing with Aunt Prudence's declining health and the shocking revelation that she intended to leave me everything. My secretive behavior and frequent trips to visit her at Maplewood Assisted Living had been interpreted by my family as signs that I was struggling with my thesis or having personal problems. Camila's always been sensitive, my mother, Linda Restrepo, would tell relatives who asked about my withdrawn behavior. She takes everything so seriously. Sometimes I worry she doesn't know how to enjoy life like other young people. The truth was, I'd been learning about textile manufacturing, international trade, and investment portfolios from a woman who'd built a fortune by age 35, but had spent the last 40 years letting people underestimate her. Aunt Prudence had taught me more about business strategy in 6 months than I'd learned in 4 years of college courses. But when I graduated and immediately enrolled in the nonprofit management master's program, instead of pursuing corporate opportunities, my family interpreted this as a lack of ambition rather than a deliberate choice to understand how to use wealth responsibly. Natalie, who had followed the traditional path, business internships, immediate corporate job, steady boyfriend, apartment in the trendy Riverside district, had appointed herself as my life coach over the past 2 years. She'd spent countless family dinners offering unsolicited advice about my career choices, my appearance, and my social life. The problem with Camila, she'd explained to our cousin Rachel at last year's Christmas gathering, is that she doesn't understand how the real world works. She thinks being passionate about helping people is enough, but you need practical skills and networking to get anywhere. She's stuck in this idealistic mindset that's going to leave her broke and disappointed. Idealistic mindset? This from a woman whose idea of strategic career planning was updating her LinkedIn profile with buzzwords she found in marketing blogs. The family narrative had solidified around several key misconceptions about my life. My education. They believed I was accumulating massive student debt for a degree that would lead to a low-paying nonprofit job. When I tried to explain that graduate school was an investment in understanding how to create systemic change, they assumed I meant I was planning to work for small local charities. It's sweet that Camila wants to save the world, Natalie had told Derek's parents at a dinner party, but someone needs to explain to her that good intentions don't pay rent. My living situation, because I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Willowbrook Heights instead of upgrading to the expensive downtown lofts my siblings preferred, they concluded I was struggling financially. My apartment was actually in a neighborhood I'd researched extensively, an up-and-coming area where I'd been quietly buying properties through investment companies as part of my wealth management strategy. When my mother had offered to co-sign for a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, she'd been offering to help someone who secretly owned 3 buildings in the area she was worried about.
My transportation. The 10-year-old Toyota Camry that my family saw as evidence of financial limitation was actually a deliberate choice. It was reliable, efficient, and unremarkable. Perfect for someone who didn't want to draw attention to her actual financial situation. When I needed to meet with financial advisors or property managers, I used car-sharing services or ride-shares. My social life? The fact that I didn't date publicly or bring boyfriends to family events had convinced them I was either too busy studying to have a personal life or struggling with social confidence. The reality was that I'd been learning to navigate the complex world of wealth management, charitable giving, and anonymous philanthropy. My social circle included financial advisors, nonprofit directors, and other young inheritors who understood the responsibility that came with sudden wealth. Poor Camila, Derek had whispered to Austin at Easter dinner. 27 and still single. It must be hard watching Natalie and me build our life together while she's stuck in textbooks all the time. My financial status? This was the big one. They'd constructed an entire narrative about my financial struggles based on surface-level observations. I shopped at thrift stores instead of department stores. I brought homemade gifts to family occasions instead of expensive ones. I declined expensive group dinners and family vacations. To them, this looked like someone living paycheck to paycheck on a graduate student stipend. The reality was that I'd developed these habits intentionally. Why spend $200 on dinner when $30 would be just as enjoyable? Why buy a $400 purse when a $15 thrift store find served the same function? My family saw frugality and assumed poverty. Natalie had been particularly vocal about her concerns regarding my financial future. I worry about what's going to happen to Camila after graduation, she'd told our parents 6 months ago. She's going to be 30 with no real work experience, no professional network, and probably $50,000 in student debt. What happens when she realizes that nonprofit work doesn't pay enough to live on? $50,000 in debt? Meanwhile, I'd been earning more in investment returns each month than she made at her marketing job. The most frustrating part was how they'd rewritten history to fit their narrative. When I'd paid for Austin's scholarship, they'd celebrated his academic merit and networking skills. When Natalie had mysteriously won the venue lottery for her party, they'd praised her incredible luck and professional connections. When our parents' roof had been covered by insurance, they'd attributed it to good policy management. Every anonymous gift I'd given had been explained away as coincidence, institutional generosity, or personal achievement. Anything except help from their supposedly struggling family member. My gift giving should have been a clue too. For Natalie's last birthday, I'd arranged for her and Derek to receive a weekend at Seaside Wellness Retreat, an exclusive spa resort where celebrities went to disconnect. Not just any spa, the kind of place where a 2-night stay cost more than most people's monthly salary. But because I'd presented it as a contest prize through a fake wellness blog I'd created, they'd assumed it was some kind of promotional giveaway. Natalie had posted photos on Instagram for weeks, calling it the most luxurious experience of my life, while never connecting that level of luxury with the resources required to arrange it. My Christmas gifts followed the same pattern. Last year, I'd given Austin a collection of rare business books signed by their authors, including several volumes that weren't available to the general public. The collection was worth over $3,000 and had required connections through rare book dealers and auction houses. But because I'd presented them in a simple cardboard box with a note about finding these at estate sales, Austin had assumed I'd gotten lucky at some garage sales and thrift stores. Even my academic performance had been misunderstood. I was graduating summa cum laude with a thesis on strategic philanthropy that my professors had called groundbreaking. My research on anonymous giving and family wealth dynamics was being considered for publication in academic journals. But when I mentioned my academic success during family dinners, they interpreted it as compensating for my lack of real-world experience. Camila's always been book smart, my father would say, with the tone people use when they're being politely dismissive. She just needs to learn how to apply that intelligence to practical situations. The Brandon situation had made everything worse. From the moment Natalie started seriously dating Derek, she'd been hyper-aware of how our family would appear to his fitness industry friends and clients. She'd coached our parents on conversation topics, suggested they avoid mentioning my academic phase, and specifically instructed everyone to keep discussions about my career vague. Just say Camila is still in school, she'd told them. Don't get into details about nonprofit work. Derek's friends are all entrepreneurs and business owners. They have very specific ideas about success, and I don't want them to feel sorry for us. Feel sorry for us? Because she was ashamed of having a sister who appeared to be pursuing an impractical career path? The final piece of their constructed narrative was the most painful. They decided I was bitter about their success. When I didn't gush over Natalie's job promotion, or Austin's MBA acceptance, or Derek's new personal training certification, they interpreted my measured responses as jealousy or resentment. Camila's having a hard time with everyone else's achievements, Natalie had confided to our mother. I think seeing Austin and me succeed professionally is bringing up feelings about her own choices. She's probably wondering if she made a mistake choosing such an impractical path.
What they didn't understand was that I wasn't bitter, I was busy. While they were having lengthy phone conversations about career developments and relationship milestones, I was managing investment portfolios, researching charitable organizations, and learning how to use wealth as a tool for systematic change. While they were discussing Austin's job prospects, I was reviewing financial reports that showed my anonymous scholarship fund had helped 12 students complete their education. But the most telling part of their narrative was how they'd explain my absence from family events over the years. When I'd missed Thanksgiving dinner because I was volunteering at a homeless shelter's holiday meal service, they'd assumed I was working a side job out of financial necessity. When I'd skipped the family vacation to Myrtle Beach because I was attending a philanthropy conference in Denver, they'd decided I was avoiding family gatherings because I was embarrassed about my financial situation. Camila's going through a difficult period had become my mother's standard explanation. Graduate school is stressful and she's working very hard to build something meaningful, but it's been challenging for her financially and socially. Challenging. If only they knew that the challenge was deciding whether to fund the new community arts program or focus on expanding the scholarship fund to include trade school students. As I scrolled through the frantic messages on my phone, family members trying to understand why Natalie had disinvited me, others offering to mediate, several expressing concern about family drama affecting the party,
I realized that their carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse entirely. They'd built a story where I was the struggling younger sister who didn't fit into their successful world. In about 6 hours, they were going to discover that I wasn't just successful, I was the anonymous force that had been enabling their successes all along. And the sister who had kicked me out of her birthday party for being an embarrassment was about to learn that her dream venue existed because of the family member she'd been pitying for years. By 11:30 a.m., the pressure had reached a boiling point that I could feel through my phone screen, even from my quiet apartment in Willowbrook Heights. What had started as Natalie's individual decision to disinvite me had escalated into a full family emergency, with emotions running so high that rational thinking had completely abandoned the situation. The first sign of organized opposition came through a group text that I wasn't included in, but which my cousin Rachel accidentally forwarded to me instead of our Aunt Carmen. The message thread was titled, "Camila Crisis, Urgent," and contained 3 hours worth of family members strategizing about how to handle what they were calling my emotional breakdown. They'd decided that my absence from Natalie's party, combined with what they perceived as my increasingly withdrawn behavior over the past semester, meant I was having some kind of mental health crisis. The working theory, developed collectively by my mother, Aunt Carmen, and my grandmother Esperanza, was that I'd finally cracked under the pressure of watching my successful siblings build their lives while my own remained stagnant in graduate school limbo. "This is clearly a cry for help," my Aunt Carmen had written in the group chat. "Camila's been struggling for 2 years, watching Natalie succeed professionally and Austin get his MBA. Now she's acting out because she can't handle being left behind anymore. We need to intervene before she does something really destructive to herself or the family." The family had appointed themselves as crisis counselors, each taking on specific roles in what they were treating as a mental health emergency. My mother was designated as the primary emotional contact, responsible for gentle confrontation and reality checking. My father was assigned to financial assessment, tasked with determining if I needed monetary help to get through this difficult period. Austin, despite being the youngest, had been given the role of peer counselor who could relate to academic pressure. Even Derek had been recruited to provide an outside perspective on family dynamics. What was remarkable was the speed and efficiency with which they'd organized this intervention. Within 4 hours of Natalie's message to me, they'd created action items, assigned responsibilities, and developed talking points for approaching me. It was the kind of coordination they'd never applied to actually understanding my life, but they deployed it seamlessly when they needed to manage what they saw as a public embarrassment to the family. My grandmother Esperanza, who was 79 and typically stayed out of family drama, had been recruited as the wisdom voice who would help me understand that success isn't everything and that I need to find peace with my circumstances. The fact that my circumstances included managing a multi-million-dollar inheritance and funding their family's dreams was, of course, not part of their assessment. The most telling part of their crisis response was how they'd immediately connected my absence from the party to what they saw as mounting evidence of my deteriorating mental state, but had drawn completely wrong conclusions about the relationship between these events. They'd decided that I learned about Natalie's party planning somehow, maybe through social media, and had spiraled into such despair about being excluded from her success that I declared myself unworthy to attend it. "She probably thinks this is all her fault somehow," my Aunt Carmen had contributed to the group chat. "You know how Camila takes responsibility for things that aren't her problem. She's probably convinced herself that her failures are embarrassing the family and that staying away from the party is some kind of noble sacrifice."
Noble sacrifice? They thought my absence was both a symptom of my personal failure and evidence of my selfless concern for their social standing. The idea that I might have actual power over the situation hadn't occurred to anyone. The coordination extended beyond emotional management into practical damage control. They divided up the task of reaching out to extended family members who were expected to attend the party, preparing them for potential drama, and ensuring everyone understood the approved version of events. Each family member had been assigned specific relatives to contact and given talking points about how to handle questions about my absence. My cousin Rachel had been tasked with managing our college-aged cousins, making sure they understood that my absence was due to academic stress rather than family conflict. My uncle Roberto had been assigned to handle the older relatives, explaining that I was going through a difficult transition period, but that everything would work out fine. The conversations were exercises in reputation management disguised as concern for my welfare. We just want to make sure everyone understands that this isn't about the family, my mother had written in the group chat. Camilla's struggles are personal, and we don't want people thinking there's drama or conflict between the siblings. But the most organized aspect of their response was the narrative they'd constructed about my motivations and mental state. They'd collectively decided that my actions were driven by academic pressure, financial anxiety, and resentment about my siblings' achievements. This wasn't just one person's opinion. This was a family consensus that had been reached through group discussion and mutual reinforcement. The evidence they'd assembled for my psychological decline was comprehensive and completely wrong. My simple lifestyle became proof of depression and financial stress. My focus on graduate school became evidence of social withdrawal and inability to cope with real-world pressures. My lack of serious romantic relationships became a sign of emotional dysfunction and fear of commitment. My career choice became escapism born of inability to succeed in traditional business settings. They'd even recruited outside validation for their assessment. Derek's opinion had apparently been solicited about my behavior during recent family gatherings. His professional perspective, he'd taken 2 psychology courses during his fitness certification program, was that I displayed classic signs of someone struggling with imposter syndrome and depression. She was very quiet during Easter dinner, almost withdrawn. And when we discussed everyone's career progress, she got this look on her face like she was calculating how far behind she was. It was actually quite concerning from a mental health perspective. The look on my face was me calculating whether I should mention that my investment portfolio had grown by more than Derek made in 6 months, but I decided against it. Apparently, my restraint had been interpreted as despair. The family's coordination extended to managing the broader social implications of both my absence and any potential family drama. They developed a unified story for friends, colleagues, and acquaintances that positioned my absence as unfortunate but understandable given my academic pressures and personal challenges. The official narrative was that I was going through a stressful period with graduate school and had made the mature decision not to attend the party to avoid bringing negative energy to Natalie's celebration. Any family conflict was being attributed to miscommunication and academic stress, rather than deeper issues. Several family members had already begun making calls to Natalie's friends and Derek's family, preparing them for my absence and ensuring everyone understood the approved version of events. My cousin Rachel had been specifically tasked with managing social media, making sure that any posts about the party situation didn't reflect poorly on the family's ability to handle crisis or support each other. But what was most revealing was how quickly they'd mobilized this level of organization to protect their reputation while doing absolutely nothing to understand what was actually happening. They'd spent more energy in 4 hours developing crisis management strategies than they'd spent in 2 years asking about my actual goals, challenges, or achievements. The efficiency of their response showed that they were capable of coordination and strategic thinking when it mattered to them. They could assign roles, develop talking points, and execute complex plans when they needed to manage their public image. But they'd never applied that same level of attention to understanding why their assumptions about my life might be wrong.
By 2:15 p.m., their crisis management operation was in full swing. Phone calls were being made, stories were being coordinated, and intervention strategies were being deployed. Several family members had left voicemails on my phone, each following their assigned role in the coordinated response. My mother's message was carefully crafted emotional appeal. "Sweetheart, we know you're going through something difficult right now, but family is family. Whatever is happening with school or money or anything else, we can work through it together. Please don't isolate yourself from the people who love you." Austin's voicemail took the peer-to-peer approach. "Hey, Cam. I know graduate school can be overwhelming. I've been there with the MBA pressure. But don't let academic stress mess up your relationships with family. Natalie's really hurt, and I think you two just need to talk." My father's message focused on practical support. "Mija, if this is about money for a dress or a gift or transportation to the party, you know we can help with that. Don't let pride keep you away from your sister's celebration."
Each message revealed how completely they'd misunderstood both my situation and my motivations. They were offering solutions to problems I didn't have while remaining completely oblivious to the actual dynamics at play. The most disturbing part of their coordinated response was the assumption that I was having a breakdown rather than making a deliberate choice. The idea that I might have legitimate reasons for my behavior, that I might be responding rationally to how I'd been treated, never entered their crisis management calculations. They'd created a comprehensive response to what they saw as my emotional collapse, complete with mental health support, financial assistance, and reputation management. What they hadn't considered was the possibility that I wasn't collapsing at all, that my absence from the party wasn't self-imposed exile bored of inadequacy, but a strategic response to being dismissed by people who had no idea who they were actually dealing with. The intervention they were planning would become a revelation they weren't prepared for. The family members who had organized themselves to manage my supposed crisis were about to learn that they'd been managing the wrong emergency entirely. As 3 p.m. approached and Natalie's party was scheduled to begin in just 5 hours, I realized it was time to make the phone call that would transform their carefully coordinated crisis response into something much more complicated. They were about to discover that their struggling graduate student had been the anonymous architect of their family's recent good fortune, and that the sister they were trying to save from her own destructive behavior was about to show them exactly what destruction looked like when someone owned the infrastructure they were desperately trying to navigate. At exactly 3:17 p.m., 4 hours and 43 minutes before Natalie's birthday party was scheduled to begin, I made the phone call that would shatter every assumption my family had built about my life over the past 2 years. I was sitting in my home office, surrounded by investment portfolios and charitable foundation documents that told the real story of who I'd become since inheriting Aunt Prudence's fortune. Instead of calling my family directly, I did something they weren't expecting. I arranged a conference call that would reveal the truth with professional authority and legal documentation that would make denial impossible. My first call was to Harrison & Associates, the law firm that had handled Aunt Prudence's estate and now managed my various philanthropic entities. Margaret Harrison, the senior partner who had become my trusted advisor over the past 2 years, answered immediately. "Margaret, I need your help with a family situation that requires complete transparency about my financial status and philanthropic activities. My family has made some assumptions about my life that need to be corrected with official documentation." "What kind of documentation, Camila?" she asked, her voice carrying the professional concern of someone who'd handled delicate family wealth situations before. "Everything. The inheritance, the investment growth, the anonymous giving through shell companies, the property acquisitions. I need them to understand the complete scope of what I've been managing while they thought I was struggling through graduate school." "I see. Do you need this for legal protection or family reconciliation? Family education, I replied. They're planning an intervention because they think I'm having a mental breakdown. They have no idea they're trying to intervene with someone who's been anonymously funding their successes for 2 years. My second call was to David Chen at Meridian Investment Management, the firm that had helped me grow Aunt Prudence's $2.8 million inheritance into a $4.2 million portfolio over the past 24 months. David had been instrumental in teaching me how to balance growth investments with liquid assets for charitable giving. David, I need you available for a conference call at 4 p.m. today to provide professional documentation of my portfolio performance and investment strategy. Family situation requiring complete financial disclosure. Personal or legal matter? He asked. Personal, but I need the corporate credibility. My family is dealing with assumptions about my financial situation that are completely incorrect. They've organized a crisis intervention for someone they think is broke and struggling. Understood. Should I prepare the full portfolio summary or focus on specific achievements? Full disclosure. I want them to understand that their struggling graduate student has been outperforming most professional investors while completing her master's degree. My third call was to Rosehaven Manor directly. I'd been avoiding this conversation for 3 months, but the time for anonymity was over. When the events manager, Patricia Kellerman, answered, I identified myself using my real name instead of the shell company. Miss Kellerman, this is Camila Restrepo. I'm the actual sponsor behind the birthday party scheduled for tonight under the Marketing Industry Promotion Program. There was a pause as she processed this information. Ms. Restrepo, I'm not sure I understand. The sponsorship came through Prosperity Foundation's Community Outreach Initiative. Prosperity Foundation is my charitable entity. I created the marketing industry promotion specifically to give my sister Natalie the venue she wanted for her 30th birthday. But there's been a family situation, and I need to speak with you about modifying tonight's arrangements. What kind of modifications? Her voice carried the careful tone of someone who sensed complications approaching. The beneficiary has decided she doesn't want me at the celebration. Since I'm the actual sponsor, I need to discuss whether the event should proceed under these circumstances. My fourth call was to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the nonprofit management professor who had been supervising my thesis on anonymous philanthropy and family wealth dynamics. She'd been fascinated by my real-world case study of secret giving within family systems, though she didn't know she was supervising research on my own family.
Dr. Walsh, I need a professional favor. Would you be available for a brief conference call at 4 p.m. to discuss my thesis research from an academic perspective? The family I've been studying anonymously is actually my own family, and they're about to learn that they've been the subjects of my research. Camila, are you saying your thesis on anonymous family philanthropy has been based on your own giving patterns? Yes, the case study of dysfunctional family dynamics around unrecognized wealth transfers has been my own family for the past 2 years. They're planning an intervention because they think I'm having a breakdown, not realizing they're trying to counsel someone who's been successfully managing a multi-million-dollar portfolio and funding their recent successes. After completing these calls, I sent a text to the family group chat. I appreciate everyone's concern about my well-being. I've arranged a conference call for 4 p.m. today that will provide clarity about my situation and help everyone understand what's actually been happening. Please gather at Mom and Dad's house for the call. At exactly 4 p.m., I dialed into the conference call that would destroy every misconception my family had constructed about my life. The timing was perfect. 4 hours before Natalie's party was supposed to begin, just enough time for the full implications to sink in. Good afternoon, everyone, I said as the call connected. Thank you all for joining on short notice. I have my family gathered together along with several professional associates who can provide complete transparency about my actual situation over the past 2 years. I could hear confused murmurs from my family's end as they tried to position themselves around the speakerphone in my parents' living room. They were expecting to provide emotional support for my breakdown, not participate in a business conference call. Let me begin with introductions, I continued, maintaining the professional tone that had been unsettling them all afternoon. First, we have Margaret Harrison, senior partner at Harrison and Associates, who has served as my legal counsel for estate and philanthropic matters. Margaret's voice came through with crisp professional authority. Good afternoon. I've been handling legal matters for Ms. Rarespo since she inherited her great-aunt's estate 24 months ago. This includes managing multiple charitable entities and overseeing significant philanthropic activities. Inherited estate. I heard someone, I think it was Austin, whisper, "What?" in the background. We also have David Chen at Meridian Investment Management, who has coordinated my portfolio growth and investment strategy. David's introduction was delivered with the kind of financial precision that made trust fund managers nervous. Good afternoon. I've been managing Ms. Rarespo's investment portfolio, which has grown from $2.8 million to $4.2 million over the past 24 months, while maintaining liquidity for substantial charitable distributions. $4.2 million. The silence from my family's end was becoming noticeable. This wasn't sounding like a conversation about graduate student financial struggles. Additionally, I said, we have Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the university's nonprofit management program who can speak to my academic research on family wealth dynamics. Dr. Walsh's introduction carried academic authority that would resonate with my education-focused family. Good afternoon. Ms. Rarespo has been conducting groundbreaking research on anonymous philanthropy within family systems. Her thesis work has documented how unrecognized wealth transfers affect family relationships and individual identity development. And finally, I said, Patricia Kellerman from Rosehaven Manor, who can provide details about tonight's birthday celebration arrangements. Patricia's voice carried the polished tone of luxury event management. Good afternoon. I've been coordinating tonight's birthday celebration, which was sponsored through what we now understand to be Ms. Rarespo's private charitable foundation. The event represents an $8,000 venue donation plus additional amenities. $8,000 donation. The same amount Natalie had been bragging about saving through her incredible luck in winning the venue lottery. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard my mother's voice, small and confused. Camila, sweetheart, I think there's been some mistake. We're calling because we're worried about your financial situation and your emotional state. We don't understand what this business call is about. Margaret's response was legally precise and devastating. Mrs. Rarespo, there's no mistake. Your daughter has been managing substantial inherited wealth for 2 years while completing her graduate education. She's also been providing anonymous financial support to multiple family members during this time. Anonymous financial support. Brandon's voice cracked slightly when he spoke. What kind of support? This was my moment. 2 years of hidden generosity, 2 years of watching my family pity me while I funded their dreams, 2 years of being dismissed as unsuccessful while building a philanthropic legacy that would have impressed Aunt Prudence herself. All of it had led to this single moment of revelation. I've been the anonymous benefactor behind several family successes over the past 2 years, I said quietly. Austin's MBA scholarship was a fund I created and named after our county specifically to help him. Natalie's interview coaching was paid for through a fake radio contest promotion I arranged. Mom and Dad's roof repair was covered by me, not insurance. And tonight's birthday party venue was sponsored through my charitable foundation because Natalie wanted a celebration she couldn't afford. The explosion of voices from their end was immediate and chaotic. I heard Natalie scream, my mother gasp, and several people talking at once, in voices too overlapping to distinguish. David Chen provided supporting financial details while my family processed the initial shock.
For additional context, Ms. Respo has distributed approximately $125,000 in anonymous family support over the past 24 months while maintaining portfolio growth and completing her academic program.
$125,000. While they'd been worried about my ability to afford textbooks, I'd been quietly funding their successes to the tune of more than most people made in 2 years. Dr. Walsh added the academic perspective that would shatter their assumptions about my career prospects. I should mention that Ms. Restrepo's thesis research has already attracted interest from 3 major foundations for potential policy development positions. Her work on anonymous giving dynamics is being considered for publication in the Journal of Philanthropic Studies. Policy development positions. While they'd assumed I was pursuing an impractical degree that would lead to low-paying charity work, I'd been conducting research that could lead to executive positions at major foundations. But it was Patricia Kellerman's addition that truly drove home the scope of what they'd been dismissing. The Rosehaven Manor celebration tonight represents just one of several events Ms. Restrepo has sponsored through her foundation. Her organization has become one of our most valued partners for community enhancement projects. Most valued partners. The venue manager who dealt with Fortune 500 corporate events and celebrity celebrations was describing their struggling graduate student as a valued institutional partner. The silence returned, but this time it was the silence of people whose entire understanding of reality had just collapsed. Everything they'd believed, every assumption they'd made, every intervention strategy they'd developed, all of it was being recontextualized in real time. Margaret provided the legal framework that made it all undeniably official. I can confirm that Ms. Restrepo has full legal control over substantial assets and has been operating multiple charitable entities with complete professional oversight. Her philanthropic activities over the past 2 years have been both legally compliant and strategically effective. Now it was time to address the immediate situation. Which brings us to tonight's birthday party, I said, taking control of the call again. The venue that Natalie has been celebrating as her incredible good fortune was arranged by the sister she told not to attend because I would be embarrassing. The weight of their assumptions was hitting them now. Every dismissive comment about my impractical career choice, every intervention plan they'd developed, every crisis management strategy they'd deployed, all of it had been directed at someone who controlled exactly what they'd been desperately trying to understand. The conference call ended at 4:47 p.m., and by 5:15 p.m., my phone had received 43 individual calls, 29 text messages, and 7 voicemails from various family members trying to process what they'd just learned. I answered none of them. Instead, I sat in my apartment reviewing the quarterly reports from my investment portfolio while my family grappled with the complete collapse of their understanding of reality. The first crack in their coordinated crisis response came through a text from Austin at 5:23 p.m. Camila, I don't even know where to begin. I've been sitting here for 30 minutes trying to understand how we got everything so completely wrong. The scholarship that changed my life came from my sister, who I thought needed help paying for groceries. I'm sorry, doesn't even begin to cover this. Austin had been the family member most likely to ask thoughtful questions about my goals over the years. But even he had accepted the general narrative that I was struggling with practical life skills. His message revealed that at least one person was beginning to grasp not just the magnitude of my success, but the magnitude of their collective failure to see me clearly. The second crack came from my father at 5:38 p.m. in a voicemail that I could hear was recorded away from the others. Mija, I've been sitting in my car in the driveway because I can't face your mother right now. We've been offering to help you with money for 2 years while you were paying for our roof. We've been worried about your future while you were building Austin's future. I don't know how to apologize for not seeing who you really are. His voice carried a weight that suggested he was beginning to understand the deeper implications of what had been revealed. This wasn't just about money or success. It was about recognition, respect, and the fundamental failure to know their own family member.
But it was the group dynamics that were most revealing. By 6 p.m., according to messages I was receiving from Rachel, the unified family intervention had completely fractured. The crisis that had brought them together in coordinated opposition to my supposed breakdown had been replaced by individual reckonings with their own assumptions and behavior. My mother was apparently going through old conversations and family gatherings, trying to identify signs of my wealth that she'd missed or misinterpreted. She keeps pulling out photos from holidays and asking how she didn't notice that Camila always looked confident and relaxed, not stressed like someone struggling financially, Rachel reported. My father was reviewing every interaction we'd had about career and money, suddenly realizing that my calm responses to their financial concerns weren't defensive denial. They were the responses of someone who knew their worries were unnecessary. Natalie was having what Rachel described as a complete emotional breakdown, but not the kind my family had been expecting from me. Instead of being relieved that her party could proceed as planned, she was devastated by the realization of how thoroughly she'd misjudged and mistreated her own sister.
She keeps saying, "I told the person who paid for my party that she was too embarrassing to attend," Rachel texted. "She's not crying about the venue anymore. She's crying about what she did to you." Derek was apparently in a state of shock that bordered on disbelief. He'd spent months offering career advice to someone whose investment portfolio generated more monthly income than his annual salary from personal training. His fitness industry connections, which he'd positioned as valuable networking opportunities for our struggling family, now seemed laughably small compared to the foundation boards and investment management relationships I'd been building. But it was the reaction of my extended family that revealed the most about the social dynamics that had driven this entire situation. Aunt Carmen and Uncle Roberto, who had spent the afternoon coordinating crisis intervention strategies, were now frantically trying to reposition themselves with someone they'd just discovered was among the wealthiest members of our extended family. According to a message from my cousin Rachel, Aunt Carmen had spent 2 hours researching philanthropic foundations, trying to understand exactly what kind of influence I might have in nonprofit and academic circles. When she learned that my thesis advisor had connections to major national foundations, her tone had shifted from patronizing concern to something approaching reverence. She keeps asking if you could provide letters of recommendation for her daughter's graduate school applications, Rachel reported. She went from thinking you were having a breakdown to wanting to use your academic connections for her own family's benefit. The speed of their transformation revealed exactly how transactional their original concerns had been. They hadn't been worried about my well-being or personal fulfillment. They'd been worried about how my apparent lack of success reflected on the family's overall achievement narrative. Uncle Roberto's reaction was more straightforward but equally telling. He'd immediately started calculating the business implications of having a successful philanthropist in the family. His questions weren't about relationships or apologies. They were about potential funding opportunities for his small construction business and whether I might consider investing in local development projects. He wants to know if you'd be interested in funding a community renovation project he's been trying to get off the ground, my father had mentioned in his voicemail. He's talking about it like it would be a great opportunity for you, but I think he's starting to understand that you'd be doing him the favor. The most profound revelation came through my grandmother Esperanza's reaction, as reported by my Aunt Carmen. At 79, grandmother had lived long enough to recognize patterns in family dynamics, and she was apparently the first person to fully grasp the long-term implications of what had been revealed. She keeps saying, "We lost her," Carmen's message read. She understands that this isn't just about money or the party. She says we've been treating our most successful family member like a charity case for 2 years, and that kind of blindness damages relationships permanently. The academic world was also reacting to the family drama in ways my relatives weren't anticipating. Dr. Walsh had fielded 2 calls from colleagues who'd heard about my research situation and wanted to discuss the ethical implications of studying your own family's wealth dynamics.
The possibility that my thesis work could become a landmark case study in philanthropic psychology was generating interest from researchers who specialized in family wealth systems. 2 professors from the philanthropy program want to interview you about your research methodology, Dr. Walsh had mentioned during a follow-up call. The idea of conducting anonymous giving research on your own family while being the subject of their assumptions is unprecedented in the field. The business community had taken notice as well. Margaret Harrison reported that 3 other families had inquired about similar anonymous giving strategies after hearing about my case through professional networks. The legal complexities of managing secret family philanthropy were apparently more common than most people realized. Your situation has sparked conversations among estate planning attorneys about the psychological dynamics of inherited wealth and family relationships, Margaret had explained. The combination of academic research and practical application make your case unique in the field. By 7:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes before Natalie's party was scheduled to begin, I received a call from my sister herself. Her voice was barely recognizable through the tears and exhaustion. "Camila, I can't have this party knowing what I know now. I can't celebrate in a venue you paid for after telling you that you weren't good enough to be there. I need to cancel everything and find a way to apologize that actually matters." This was the conversation I'd been both hoping for and dreading. Natalie wasn't just apologizing for the immediate slate. She was recognizing the deeper pattern of dismissal and condescension that had characterized her treatment of me for years. "I've been thinking about every conversation we've had since you started graduate school. Every time I gave you career advice, every time I worried about your finances, every time I treated you like someone who needed guidance instead of someone who was building something meaningful. I was so focused on traditional success markers that I completely missed the fact that you were succeeding beyond anything I could imagine." The transformation in her understanding was complete, but more importantly, it was genuine. She wasn't trying to reposition herself for advantage or attempting to repair relationships for social reasons. She was confronting the reality of how badly she'd misjudged someone she should have known better than anyone.
"The worst part," she said, "is that I convinced myself I was helping you. I thought I was being a good sister by offering advice and expressing concern. I was so busy trying to fix your life that I never bothered to understand what your life actually was." This was the insight that mattered most. Natalie was recognizing that her behavior hadn't been driven by cruelty, but by a form of condescending kindness that was actually more damaging than deliberate dismissal. She'd been protecting me from situations where I was actually more qualified and accomplished than anyone else who would be present. "I want to cancel the party," she repeated. "Not just postpone it, cancel it entirely. I can't celebrate my success in a venue that represents your generosity after spending 2 years treating your success like failure." But this was where I could demonstrate the difference between having power and using it destructively. "Natalie, I don't want you to cancel your party. I want you to have the celebration you deserve. But I want you to have it knowing who actually made it possible. And I want you to think about what that means for how we treat each other going forward." The party did happen that night, exactly as planned, in the beautiful ballroom at Rosehaven Manor. But it was a completely different celebration than anyone had expected. Instead of a venue won through luck and professional connections, it became an event that acknowledged generosity, family complexity, and the importance of seeing people clearly. Natalie spent part of the evening telling guests about her sister's philanthropic work and academic achievements. Austin used his toast to talk about the importance of recognizing success in all its forms. My parents spent the night asking relatives about their own assumptions and blind spots. I didn't attend the party, not because I wasn't invited. I chose not to attend because I wanted my family to celebrate while thinking about what they'd learned, rather than trying to manage their discomfort about their previous behavior. 6 months later, our family dynamics had transformed in ways that surprised everyone. Instead of offering unsolicited advice about my career, my family started asking genuine questions about my work and goals.
Instead of assuming financial struggles, they began recognizing that my choices reflected strategy rather than limitation. Natalie left her marketing job and started a nonprofit focused on supporting first-generation college students, inspired by understanding the impact that anonymous giving could have on individual lives. Austin finished his MBA and asked me to mentor him in investment strategies, acknowledging that his academically successful sister had practical financial knowledge he wanted to learn. My parents began volunteering with organizations I supported, not to gain access to my wealth, but to understand the causes I cared about and contribute their own skills and time. The most meaningful change was that our family conversations shifted from performance and status comparison to genuine interest in each other's experiences and goals. We learned to celebrate different kinds of success and to ask questions before making assumptions. The birthday party that revealed my hidden generosity had ultimately led to something more valuable than recognition or vindication. It had created the foundation for authentic family relationships based on truth, curiosity, and mutual respect rather than assumptions, hierarchy, and conditional acceptance. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family isn't proving them wrong about your failures, it's helping them learn to see success in all its forms, and teaching them that love means taking the time to understand who someone really is, rather than deciding who they should be. The people who had spent 2 years worrying about my future had learned that I'd been building their future all along. But more importantly, they'd learned that assumptions are the enemy of genuine connection, and that real family support means seeing each other clearly rather than trying to fix problems that don't actually exist. Next up, 2 more stories chosen just for you. If you enjoyed this, you'll want to see what's coming. Tap to keep going.